A tiny airplane, 2 men, and a mission so dangerous, it still feels impossible even today. A hotel owner in Las Vegas had a strange dream to keep an airplane in the sky, not for hours, not for days, but for months, without ever touching the ground. But this challenge wasn't just about fuel. It was a story of sleep deprivation, the freezing cold of December, and maintaining a delicate balance between life and death. And the question is, did these 2 pilots actually break the impossible record? Or did their plane vanish forever into the blue sky? A bizarre piece of history, almost forgotten in old books, today brought back to life on your screen. Welcome back to another video on FAMU TV. 1956, a man named Warren Bailey opened a small hotel in Las Vegas. Unlike the big casinos, his hotel attracted simple, rural visitors. It wasn't expensive, which is why everyday people preferred it. But because profits were low, Bailey constantly tried to find new ways to promote his hotel. One day, his friend Bob Tim, a former Army pilot, suggested that breaking a world record could bring huge publicity to the hotel. His idea? Fly a plane without touching the ground, not for days, but for months. Bailey liked the idea, but he wondered if it could really promote the hotel. And more importantly, was it even possible? To understand the challenge, we need to know how aviation evolved. In the early days of flight, records were measured in seconds. As technology improved, planes stayed in the air longer, until eventually, the limit became the size of the fuel tank. In 1923, the U.S. Army solved that by refueling a plane mid-air from another aircraft. And soon after, the first endurance record was shattered. A DH-4B plane stayed airborne for 37 hours, after being refueled 9 times. After that, America became obsessed with endurance flights. And in 1929, the record was broken 5 different times. But when Bob Tim gave his idea to Bailey, the craze had faded. Not because airplanes were failing, but because now the real limits were the human body. How long could a pilot stay awake? How long could they survive? Bob proposed to break the record set in 1949, when 2 Navy pilots kept a plane named the Aranca Sedan airborne for 46 days. Bailey loved the idea and asked Bob Tim to fly the mission himself. After all, Tim was a decorated World War II pilot. Tim went to McCarran Field Airport, bought a Cessna 172, and hired a mechanic to modify it for the mission. They removed the co-pilot's seat and replaced it with a foam pad, so one pilot could sleep while the other flew. They removed the back seats and created an 8-square-foot storage space for supplies. They even installed a small sink so they could take sponge baths in the cramped 4-foot-high cabin. Next came the most important upgrade, a 95-gallon belly tank attached under the plane. A powered winch was installed to pull up the fuel hose from refueling trucks on the ground. They removed the co-pilot's door and added a folding panel to make it easier to reach the fuel port. They even built a tiny fold-out platform outside the door so the pilot could stand upright, the only place in the entire cabin where standing was possible. This was back in the era when stuntmen would climb between planes mid-flight. So these modifications, as dangerous as they sound today, were considered normal back then. The engine was modified for long-term use, and on the airplane's exterior, they painted the words Hacienda, because promoting the hotel was the mission's main purpose. Test flights, 1958. In the summer of 1958, they began test flights. But problems appeared, one after another. Bob and the co-pilot he hired didn't get along. They argued constantly. The first test failed. So did the second. During the third test, the argument got so bad, Bob fired the co-pilot mid-mission. Meanwhile, another team in Dallas had already spent 50 days in the air in a similar Cessna 172, breaking the previous record. Bob felt the pressure. He fixed the engine issues and searched for a new co-pilot, John Cook. December 4, 1958, official launch. FAI, International Federation of Automobiles. Officials came to witness the takeoff. After takeoff, the plane returned to the runway so a chase car could paint the tires with a special white coating. If they secretly touched the ground later, the paint would scrape off, and the record wouldn't count. 12 hours later, it was time for the first refuel. They flew low over a highway where a fuel truck waited. The pilot slowed the plane to about 100 kilometers per hour, the maximum speed the truck could match. When the plane hovered just 20 feet above the truck, John Cook lowered the winch. Workers attached the hose, and Cook lifted it up into the belly tank. For 3 minutes, the truck and plane moved perfectly together. A single mistake meant instant death. After fueling, the hose was thrown back down, and the plane flew off again. If they wanted to break the 50-day record, they needed to repeat this process at least 100 times. In the following days, they stayed close to Las Vegas in case something went wrong. When everything seemed stable, they began flying over California's empty deserts. Flying higher saved fuel, but temperatures were freezing, and the plane's insulation was poor, so they stayed low most of the time. The two pilots grew close, reading books, exercising, and talking to pass the time. During refueling, they also pulled up water containers, engine oil, and even hot meals from the Hacienda Hotel's chef. And the question you're thinking, where did they use the bathroom? They had a folding camp toilet with a waste bag underneath, which they emptied over remote deserts. This detail was revealed years later by Cook's wife. 36 days in. They spent New Year's Eve in the plane, but exhaustion hit hard. One night, Tim fell asleep at the controls just minutes before the next shift change. Shockingly, he didn't wake up for an entire hour. The plane flew on autopilot straight into a canyon. Had Tim slept a few more minutes, they would have crashed into a mountain. Autopilot keeps a plane straight, not safe. Day 39, a crisis. On January 12th, the plane's generator failed. No radio, no lights, no fuel pump. A wind-powered generator was sent up, but it could only power the radio. They pumped fuel by hand for the rest of the mission. Nighttime refueling became extremely dangerous. They tied a flashlight to the winch so the ground crew could see the hose, and added a second truck 300 feet ahead to shine a spotlight. More systems failed. The fuel gauge, the tachometer, and the engine began to accumulate carbon. Breaking the record January 23rd. As the date approached, the Hacienda Hotel finally got the publicity it wanted. They published schedules so newspapers and the public could watch the plane pass overhead. A photographer plane even flew alongside to capture iconic images. At one point, co-pilot Cook performed a stunt, pretending to clean the windshield mid-air to excite the media. At 3:52 p.m. on January 23rd, they officially broke the 50-day record. But the pilots refused to land. After all that suffering, they wanted to push the record even further. They stayed in the air for 14 more days. February 7, 1959. After 64 days, 22 hours, 19 minutes and 5 seconds, the plane was no longer safe to fly. They requested permission to land, and finally touched down at McCarran Field. A massive crowd was waiting. Reporters, officials, supporters, Tim's family, and the entire Hacienda Hotel staff. The pilots were so weak, they couldn't even climb out of the plane on their own. Officials confirmed the white paint on the tires was intact, proving the plane never touched the ground. In 2015, FAI discontinued piloted endurance flight records because of the danger. This means Tim and Cook's world record will remain unbreakable forever. The Cessna 172 they flew now hangs inside McCarran Airport's Terminal 1 baggage claim, still telling its incredible story to everyone who walks by. We hope you enjoyed this episode of FAMU TV. Thank you for your amazing comments and support. See you in the next incredible video.